When Jack Reed confronted Pete Hegseth, the room went silent. Because this wasn't about politics anymore. It was about truth, accountability, and the future of America's military.
Thank you. You're a very understanding chairman. I like that. I like that. Ms. Hegseth, you've written, and it's quote, "Oh yeah, and fire any general who hasn't carried water for Obama and Biden's extra constitution and agenda-driven transformation for our military. Clean house and start over." It's come to my attention that current serving military personnel have received emails threatening them with being fired for supporting the current DoD policies. One mail that was sent to a military officer with the subject line, "Clean house," reminiscent of your specific comment, states, and I quote, "With the incoming administration looking to remove disloyal, corrupt, traitorous, liberal officers such as yourself, we will certainly be putting your name into the list of those personnel to be removed. We know you support the woke DEI policies and will ensure you never again influence anyone in the future. You and the redacted spouse's name will be lucky if you're able to collect your military requirement," end quote. Now, I want to remind everyone that these policies that are being referred to date back decades, to the 1940s and 50s with respect to racial discrimination particularly, and administrations of both parties, including the Trump administration and their first party, caused those policies to be enforced. Mr. Hegseth, are you aware of these emails being sent to officers?
Senator, you mentioned the word accountability, which is something we have not had for the last 4 years.
Are you aware of these messages being sent to officers?
Certainly I'm not aware of that. It's not one of my efforts, but there's been no accountability for the disaster of the withdrawal in Afghanistan. And that's precisely why we're here today. Is that leadership has been unwilling to take accountability. It's the time to restore that to our most senior ranks.
You've written publicly that DI policy is a distraction and have military personnel walking on eggshells. Do you believe that emails like that are essentially threatening both a serving officer and a spouse and claiming that they'll lose their pension will have a distraction and detract from the lethality?
Senator, you mentioned the 40s and 50s, and you're precisely right. The military was a forerunner in courageous racial integration in ways no other institutions were willing to do. I served with men and women of all backgrounds because of the courage of people decades and decades ago. Incredibly important. However, the DEI policies of today are not the same as what happened back then. They're dividing troops inside formations, causing commanders to walk on eggshells, not putting meritocracy first. That's the indictment that's made by those serving right now.
Excuse me.
And why we're having this conversation.
All of your public comments don't talk about meritocracy. They talk about liberal democratic efforts that are destroying the military, that those people are our enemies. That's not meritocracy. That's a political view. And your goal, as I see emerging, is to politicize the military in favor of your particular positions, which you've outlined extensively, which would be the worst blow to the professionalism of the United States military and would undercut readiness, undercut retention, because I can see officers receiving these emails beginning to wonder very seriously if they should continue. Let me change subject for a moment here. You've been instrumental in securing pardons for several convicted war criminals. In at least 2 of these cases, the military personnel who served in combat with these convicted service members were not supportive of the pardons. They did their duty as soldiers to report war crimes. Your definition of lethality seems to embrace those people who do commit war crimes, rather than those who stand up and say, this is not right. So what's the response to your service members who personally witnessed these and courageously reported them to their superiors?
Senator, as someone who's led men in combat directly and had to make very difficult decisions, I've thought very deeply about the balance between legality and lethality, ensuring that the men and women on the front lines have the opportunity to destroy with and close the enemy, and that lawyers aren't the ones getting in the way. I'm not talking about disavowing the laws of war or the Geneva Conventions or the Uniform Code of Military Justice. Sir, I'm talking about restrictive rules of engagement that these men and women behind me understand they've lived with on the battlefield, which has made it more difficult to defeat our enemies. In many of the cases you're talking about in particular, sir, there was evidence withheld, there was prosecutorial misconduct, and as someone who looks case by case and defaults to the warfighter, to the men and women with dust on their boots, not the second-guessers in air-conditioned offices in Washington, D.C.
Excuse me.
I look case by case and was proud to work with President Trump to understand those cases and ensure that our warriors are always looked out for.
Those cases were adjudicated by who? People in Washington or fellow non-commissioned officers who had also served, sacrificed, and believed in the ethic of the military? Who were the court-martial?
Senator, in multiple cases, they were actually acquitted, but charges
cases,
lingered.
yes,
regardless of where those convening authorities were, yes, sir.
Some were, but others were convicted, and you asked for pardon. That's the only reason you asked for pardon, because they were convicted. But the other factor, too, is you've already disparaged in writing the Geneva Convention, the rules of law, all of these things. How will you be able to effectively lead a military in which one of the principal elements is discipline, respect for lawful authority? You have made statements to your platoon after being briefed by a JAG officer. Well, by the way, would you explain what a JAG-off is?
I don't think I need to, sir.
Why not?
Because the men and women watching understand.
Well, perhaps some of my colleagues don't understand.
It would be a JAG officer who puts his or her own priorities in front of the warfighters. Their promotions, their medals, in front of having the backs of those who are making the tough calls on the front lines.
Thank you, Senator Reid.
Interesting.
Thank you, Senator
Thank you
Reid.
very much.
Senator Fisher.
Thank you, Mr.
This exchange between Senator Jack Reed and Pete Hegseth wasn't just tense, it was revealing. It peeled back the surface of what's often disguised as a debate about policy and exposed something far more consequential, a clash over the soul and moral direction of America's military. Jack Reed isn't the kind of lawmaker who raises his voice or trades insults. He's calm, methodical, but precise, and that's what makes his questioning so devastating. Every word, every phrase was aimed at uncovering what Pete Hegseth truly believes about leadership, accountability, and what it means to serve the nation honorably. When Reed read aloud those disturbing words, clean house, remove disloyal liberal officers, traitorous personnel, he wasn't quoting some fringe blog. He was quoting the man sitting in front of him, someone being considered to lead the Department of Defense. Words like those, sent in emails to active duty officers and their families, carry the weight of threat and fear. They're not about enforcing discipline or standards, they're about enforcing ideology. And Reed wanted to know, does Hegseth believe the military should be loyal to the Constitution or to a political movement? You could see Hegseth trying to deflect, shifting the conversation toward accountability and the failure in Afghanistan, phrases that sound principled but dodge the question entirely. Because accountability to Hegseth seems to mean punishing those who disagree, not examining one's own failures. And that's what Reed was exposing, a dangerous kind of selective patriotism that replaces duty with partisanship. Then came the discussion about DEI, diversity, equity, and inclusion, and this is where the conversation got to the heart of America's unfinished business. DEI isn't about wokeness, no matter how often that word gets weaponized. It's about acknowledging that for most of U.S. history, opportunity in the military, just like in the rest of society, wasn't equal. Jack Reed reminded Hegseth that the military led the way in racial integration back in the 1940s and 50s. It was a model of progress when the rest of the country still resisted it. But Hegseth's rhetoric, calling DEI divisive, accusing it of undermining merit, plays on a modern form of resentment. It suggests that inclusion somehow weakens performance. But that's not supported by facts nor by history. A more inclusive force doesn't divide, it strengthens. It draws on the full talent and potential of every American willing to serve. Reed knows this because he's seen what exclusion costs in morale, in trust, in unity. The moment that truly captured the moral divide, though, came when Reed confronted Hegseth over his defense of war criminals. This wasn't a small disagreement. It was about something sacred, the rules of war, the Geneva Conventions, and the line that separates a professional military from a violent mob. Reed pressed him, asking how someone who mocked military lawyers, who dismissed war crime convictions, could be trusted to uphold the discipline that holds the U.S. military together. Hegseth tried to reframe it as supporting the warrior, claiming that lawyers and bureaucrats were tying soldiers' hands. But Reed saw through that. Because the military isn't just about killing the enemy, it's about doing it with restraint, with legality, and with humanity. That's what makes it different from the chaos of warlords and militias. And when you blur that line, when you start excusing atrocities in the name of strength, you begin to destroy the moral authority that America claims to represent. And that's why Reed's voice carried so much weight in that room. He wasn't just questioning a nominee, he was defending a principle, that no one, no matter how powerful, is above the law. That the men and women who serve deserve leadership grounded in integrity, not ideology. This exchange also exposes something deeper about where America stands right now. There's a movement, loud, media-driven, and politically charged, that wraps itself in the flag while undermining the very values that flag stands for. It attacks inclusion, dismisses accountability, glorifies aggression, and mocks empathy as weakness. Hegseth's rise in conservative politics mirrors that movement. But Reed's questioning, steady, factual, and rooted in the traditions of democratic oversight, was a reminder that strength and morality don't have to be opposites. They can coexist. They must coexist. Because if they don't, we risk transforming our military into a tool of ideology rather than a defender of democracy. And that's the warning Jack Reed was giving, not just to Hegseth, but to the entire country. Moments like this hearing matter because they reveal what kind of leaders we're putting at the top, not just in the Pentagon, but across government. Do they respect law over loyalty, principles over politics, humanity over hostility? These are the questions that shape not just policy, but the character of the nation itself. So as you reflect on what you just watched, ask yourself, what kind of America do you want to live in? One where diversity and discipline work together to build unity, or one where political purity tests and ideological threats replace integrity and honor? If you value honest conversations that don't just replay the headlines but dig deeper into the meaning behind them, make sure you subscribe to Left Lens and hit that like button. It helps amplify this kind of independent journalism and ensures more people hear what's really at stake in moments like this. Because this isn't just commentary, it's a conversation about truth, power, and the future of democracy itself. Stay tuned, because we've got more real analysis, more truth-telling, and more unfiltered breakdowns coming your way right here on Left Lens.